Well, good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. Now, I got to figure out how this thing works. Hit the green button? Move it forward? All right. Well, I'm going to jump right into that, all right? I appreciate NARME for offering me this opportunity, and I'm excited that my wife and one of my sons are here. So this is my family. My wife and I are both products of divorce. Much of what I do, really, folks, is not because of my academics. I grew up in a broken home. I was born in 1961 in Miami. My parents divorced after 5 years. There were 4 children at the time that they divorced, and I was put in my father's custody. My dad was having an affair with a woman that would become my stepmother. I was raised by my dad and my stepmother. My mom lost custody of us. The Marxists had a lot of power and influence down in Miami and basically worked it out where mom lost custody. My father had an anger problem that I think he got from his father, and I was around 10 or 11. My dad bought a cow prod used to shock us. So I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional home. There was addictions of all kinds, sexual addictions, alcoholism, drug addictions. Never bonded to my father emotionally, never bonded to my stepmother emotionally, and my dad raised me to hate my biological mother. I had to call her Mrs. Como growing up. Imagine your own kids doing that. I don't blame myself for it because my father was my idol. My dad was my idol. I would do whatever he said to do. I am actually named after my father, Richard Darrell Marks, Jr. And so what we now know today is parental alienation syndrome. They didn't have a name for it back then, but I realized I was a victim of all of that. And then pretty dysfunctional. My father's side of the family, by the way, is Jewish. My mother's side historically are Muslim, so if you want to know why I'm bizarre, that's why. 2 competing bloodlines in one body. Baptized Catholic when I was born. Figured that one out. Dad raised us as a Unitarian, so it's like religious mud. But my faith had a lot to do with my own journey of healing, but when you're dysfunctional, you know, when you become a person of faith, you're still dysfunctional afterwards. And so I left home at age 18 and joined the Navy. Best thing I ever did. One of the theme I found out today is the military helps a lot of people heal. You ever notice that? I'm one of those. And so I got stationed in Jacksonville, Florida, where I met my wife, Luella. We were married actually 34 years, but she comes from an alcoholic home with a lot of brokenness, craziness too. So 2 broken people found each other, and we married. And I loved her, but I realized something. Even though I was in the Navy and I'm considered a man, emotionally I was a child. My dad died 34 years ago at age 47. When he did die those years ago, my father emotionally was really a teenager. And my dad could not raise his children to be healthy, mature adults because you cannot raise somebody to be something that you're not. You only raise them to be what you are. And so my father did not, and my stepmother did not have the ability to raise us to be healthy, mature adults. I had to go find that later in life and have some other men, 2 in particular, to give me what my parents could not give me because I had enough wisdom to know that if I don't change me, I'm going to pass on this generational problem to my children. And so today, at 34 years of marriage, I have 3 kids, Trey, Madison, and Jesse. Trey is 29, just got accepted. He was in the Peace Corps, was in Indonesia for the last 3 to 4 years, and just got accepted at Columbia University, worked on his master's degree. My daughter, Madison, graduated Georgetown. She's fluent in Arabic, lives in Dubai. And my youngest son is on a Fulbright scholarship right now in Amman, Jordan. He's fluent in Arabic, and he just got accepted both Oxford and Cambridge. He's chosen Cambridge. I don't say all that to brag. I do say that to anybody who wants to transform their life and get out of an addictive personality and all the crazy life can do it, because I'm here to say that Luella and I did. Because we wanted to pass on something different. That was important to us, all right? But let me give you context for my talk real quick. Number 1, I'm here to argue that addictions are not only about attachment. Although I'm going to argue it is about attachment on some level, it must be viewed through that prism. And for those of you who don't know, I'm also my doctoral dissertation was in the area of sexual addiction. I used to run an alcohol and drug program, so I am not anti-12-step. So don't go out going, hey, this guy hates the 12 steps. I'm an advocate for the 12 steps. I believe the 12 steps are necessary. I just don't think they're sufficient. Make sense? All right, now I'll hopefully convince you why later. A lot of my ideas come from my own journey of healing and growing up myself. I am not a scientist of the brain. I'd like to kind of give you a context for how I'm speaking today. All right, an airline pilot knows how to fly an airplane. He doesn't know how to fix an airplane, but he can tell you when something's not working, right? So I am not here as a mechanic on an airplane. I'm here to tell you when something's broken, I can tell. I'm the pilot today, if you think of it in that context. And then lastly, when I was doing some research on Ask Scott Scanlon about this a while back, a high number of people, and some of the researchers said just over 50%, but people who are in active recovery are divorcing, and I find that problematic. If you're in recovery, you would think you'd save your marriage, but for some reason you don't, and I want to convince you, hopefully, that you will begin to see that addicts don't bond to people, addicts bond to objects. That addicts actually are getting their human relational needs met through the addiction and not to people. And so that's kind of the context here. So if I have my objectives, here they are. To understand that all humans must bond and attach, and this bonding is a biological need just like food, air, water, and shelter. That social connection is instinctual, as we just kind of saw, and it shapes behavior. To understand that the brain is wired to avoid pain and pursue pleasure. If you have a headache, you go take something. Why? The brain doesn't like pain, it wants pleasure, all right? To understand that addiction can be viewed through a relational prism, and this prism informs our modalities, and to understand that the 10 basic relational needs, we have a term for them. We refer to them as CREST. You'll see those in a little bit. And the lack of these needs being met, just like food, air, water, and shelter, actually create pain. But whenever you're in pain, your brain is wired to avoid pain, pursue pleasure, because, folks, let's be honest, negative tension is still better than what? Exactly. And so that's kind of the context or my objectives here for us, all right? So then, I'm doing that the wrong way. All right. I believe there are 4 questions all humans have to have answered and settled in their life early in life, particularly by age 12, but I really think more towards age 6, and here they are. Every child needs to know, am I lovable? Do I have value? Do I matter? And do I have something to offer the world? I grew up at a home where I did not know that I was lovable. Actually, I didn't think I ever was. I believed that I did not matter. I didn't think I had any value, and I didn't know if I had anything to offer the world. And so I actually went into my adult life as a, quote, man, pretty broken and wounded. And you're looking for a sense of purpose, that you have value. I remember when I was standing by my dad, who wasn't an addict. I think he was a sex addict myself. I talked to family members on his side of the family that had finally convinced me that he probably did have a lot of affairs with my stepmom. I don't know. But I do know he was hypersexual. He did teach me not to use alcohol and drugs. People say, well, you don't use alcohol and drugs because of your Christian faith. That's not the reason why. I never went to alcohol and drugs because my dad, when I was 10 or 11 years old, sat me and my 2 brothers down, put a loaded gun in front of us, said, boys, let me teach you about drugs. It's real simple. You do it, it's going to kill you. If you want to do it, tell me now, we're ending it right here. And you're like, no, Daddy. No, Daddy. But that didn't stop me from developing an addictive personality. Are you with me? My father was overweight, food addictions, those kind of things. Every child needs to know those things early in life. And if those things are settled in your soul, these kids tend to thrive in life. But if those things aren't settled in your soul as you go into your adult world, you make a lot of bad choices, don't you? It's just as much as I did early on. And so this is coming from the work of Craig Knockin, who I'm very, very love his work. He basically points out that there are 3 instinctual drives in all humans. Number 1 is the drive for meaning, the drive for power, and the drive for pleasure. The drive for meaning is our domain for transformation. This is our sense of values, our sense that it's okay to be human. All right? And it's our spirituality, whatever that means for you. For some, it's religion. But we all, if you're in a recovery program, we all know about higher powers. Whatever that is for you, but you have to have some sense of meaning beyond yourself. And that when the drive of meaning is settled for a person, then that ethically influences, in a positive way, our drive for power and pleasure. The drive for power is our domain for control. We need to control parts of our world, but mature people understand they can't control anything. Think about the Serenity Prayer, because the Serenity Prayer is really about knowing what you can control and can't control. The drive for pleasure, though, is our domain for avoidance. Avoidance of what? The avoidance of pain. And so whenever I'm hungry, right, and I don't have money, I can go steal something. That is my drive for pleasure. But my value and worth says, hey, that wouldn't be a good decision because you don't want to be that kind of a person, you see. But when the drive for meaning is not in place, then what ends up happening is there's a breakdown in a person's soul. Let me get back here. And so when those drives are met in a healthy way, the drive for meaning ethically influences in a positive direction. You actually build families that are centered and healthy values. And I've just kind of put a quick slide up here for you. What are value-centered families? Here they are. In my mind, value-centered families have healthy connections and bonds. There's security. I'm secure in love. I was never secure in love. When my dad died 34 years ago, and I stood by his side, my first thought was, did I matter? And I made a decision then and there on that day, that night, there in Marietta, Georgia, in that hospital. My children, when they're born, will never have to wonder if they're loved. I will tell them regularly. They will know, they will hear it from me. They're emotionally open, there's intimate, there's respect and goodwill. They have a healthy sense of self. There's meaning in spirituality, and that translates into a life of being trusting, hopeful, joyful, friendship, loving. You see, one thing that's true about us kids from divorced home, based on national study, and I can just tell you from my own life, I learned early on, don't trust people to stick around, and don't trust people to be loyal. That's what I learned. And I took that into my marriage, and unconsciously, I expected Luella to leave me one day. Because what do people do? Now at 34 years of marriage, she'd be a fool to leave me because I'm such a great guy, all right? So I got that one solved, all right? So with that said then, when the drive for meaning is broke down, then there's not an ethical influence for drive and power. And what happens then, the drive for power was about control, and the drive for pleasure is not being ethically influenced, so it becomes a raw drive for control and a raw drive for pleasure, and people will seek things out in order to get that met. And that then leads to the brokenness of addiction, which then gives me a sense that I don't have value, because if anybody knows addictions, it's all shame-based. I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy. You see? And next thing you know, the drive for power and control and power and pleasure is unchecked. It's unchecked by values. And you wonder why addicts are so emotionally immature. And when an addict goes into recovery, you think, why are they so immature? Here's why. Because once an addiction sets in the brain, it inhibits the emotional brain, the limbic brain, from maturing. This is why you see books like Ben Sass's book, the Vanishing American Adult, something to read. I like Diane West's book, older book, but a powerful book, called The Death of the Grown-Up, How America's Arrested Development is Bringing Down Western Civilization. We have emotional children raising children today because the broken family doesn't produce healthy, mature adults. It produces immature adults. And addictions, once they set in the brain, it stunts development. I'm a good example of it. I had to grow up later in life. Now, Ackerman, if you know that name, points out the signs of family breakdown. He says they're these: increased distance between members or between family and community, emotional alienation or isolation, the building up of barriers to communication, a demoralizing of a collective sense of family, and lastly, a failing to fulfill minimum functions such as love, support, encouragement, and security. I was a latchkey kid. My dad had his issues. My stepmother had hers. We never measured up. One of my brothers says that if you think about the term evil stepmother, that's how he describes her. But see, my relationship to her was different. She was the only mother I knew because I rejected my biological mother, who did nothing. She did nothing. She was the victim of all of this. And yet I rejected her because my dad was my idol. So if he's my idol, she has to be my mother. But she really never wanted to bond to us. I could never measure up. And you begin to see all of this begin to happen in my family growing up. And I brought all of this into my adult world, all right? So addiction-centered families then, once the family becomes centered around an addiction, these are the kind of families you see. They're restrictive, they're rigid or chaotic. They're closed and guarded, and they become power-based rather than values-based. It's always about competition for love, competition for intimacy. I would compete for my dad's attention. And if I wanted his attention, I had to go into his world. And his world was not my world. I come from a long line of Marines. I went in the Navy. My dad couldn't stand Christians. I became a Christian. I could never measure up. You see, it was always looking for some sense of value and worth. And the reality is I had to learn from my relationships that I'm lovable no matter what, even if I don't think I'm lovable. Because people saw me as lovable. I just couldn't do it myself. You see, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but here's some resources for you on the idea that the brain has to bond. The book Loneliness is a clinical book. I encourage you to read it. That most people who are diagnosed with depression aren't, they're lonely. They're lonely. And we misdiagnose that when we realize they're depressed. No, they're lonely. People who are depressed move out of relationship. People who are lonely get depressed, but they're trying to find an attachment. All right? And listen to this by Dr. Lieberman. Look what he says here. He says, attachment distress is distinctively social. It is as much a signal for those around the infant as it is for the infant itself. And like a walkie-talkie, the attachment system works only if a child and caregiver stay connected. If babies were born with attachment systems that faded away in adulthood, then the cries of babies might fall on emotionally deaf ears. Fortunately, the same attachment system that causes us to cry as infants when we are separated from our caregiver also causes us to respond to our own baby's cries once we are grown. We all inherited an attachment system that lasts a lifetime, which means we never get past the social rejection. We just heard about kids being on Facebook. They're wanting to know, do they have value? Do they work? Do they matter? It's all about this. Just as we never get past the pain of hunger, we have an intense need for social connection throughout our entire lives. We say it this way: you are created to be bonded from the day you're born, and you need it to the day you die. Just like food, air, and water, shelter. I like to work with Dr. Lori Gordon. She points out, just like food, air, and water, shelter, the need to emotionally bond to other people is biological. It is a biological need that must be met and will be met. And when we do not bond to others, we will be in pain. So it is our belief that an addiction is related to a breakdown in the development of healthy relationships. Because if you don't have healthy relationships, then you feel rejected and abandoned. Nobody wants to feel rejection and abandoned, and that produces pain. Pain pursues pleasure is one of the concepts we believe in. Now look at the definition here by ASAM of an addiction. And they even include the breakdown of relationships. Here, this is the ASAM definition, that an addiction is characterized by the inability to consistently abstain, impairment in behavioral control, craving diminished recognition of significant problems with one's behaviors in interpersonal relationships, and a dysfunctional emotional response. I prefer Craig Knockin's definition in his book, The Addictive Personality, where he basically says it much more simpler, that an addiction is a pathological love and trust relationship with an object or event. That what addicts actually do, because of the pain that's in their life and the hurt in their life, rather than turning to intimate relationships to solve human problems, they turn to objects: alcohol, drugs, gambling, porn, masturbation, food, religiosity. Many years ago, I did a doctoral paper that I presented at the American Counseling Association on religious addiction. Some people aren't spiritual, they're just religiously addicted. They're looking for the high that they get from all the neurochemicals in their brain. But when you look at their life and spirituality, they're not really growing in their faith. It's religious addiction. Because what happens is they're trying to get their emotional relational needs met through an object or a process. The problem is objects cannot meet human needs. Only people can. And so we believe that if you're going to help people in recovery, yes, they need to abstain. Yes, they need 12 steps. But why, in my mind, are over half of these people divorcing? I think it's because we're not teaching them how to bond yet. You can abstain from alcohol, but there's a term out there called dry drunk. Anybody know what that means? Oh, you just ain't drinking, but your addict's still in charge. Why? Because the addict personality doesn't bond to people. It bonds to objects. And in all of us, there is a part of us that's longing for love, that's longing for connection. Or we say it this way, that there are 4 core key relationships. This comes from Knockin's work. He says every person has to bond to a higher power, something bigger than themselves. For some of you, it may be God and religion. We have to have a loving, caring sense of oneself. You must bond to family and friends, and you must bond to community. However, what addicts do, addicts give up the 4 natural forms of relationship for the addictive relationship. And so it is through the addiction that they try and get their love and intimacy needs met. And I don't know about you, but alcohol cannot comfort you long term. Alcohol cannot give you attention. Those needs can only be met in human relationships. So what happens is, kind of functionally, in a kind of a 1,000-foot view, When people are alone and disconnected, there's a lot of pain, a lot of hurt in their life. They're not healthy, mature people, and they turn to an object to escape the pain of life and of the day, and things aren't going well in their lives. What happens is when an addict takes that first hit of alcohol or that first gambling win, the intensity of the dopamine experience that they get when they act it out, the brain confuses the intensity with intimacy. It makes a confusion. I love this feeling. And I want it again. And we just heard about dopamine, but one thing that dopamine always does is dopamine creates focus. So if this becomes the focus of my dopamine, the dopamine drives my brain back to that. It wants more of the object of pleasure. And next thing you know, you keep going to more of it and more of it and more of it, and next thing you know, you're enslaved to it. But I'm bonding to it. And so that's what happens is the brain confuses intensity with intimacy. And the next thing you know, your brain stops to develop, the emotional brain. And you end up like I did, as an adult male in the United States Navy who really wasn't an adult male. I was chronologically adult, but I was an emotional child. So rather quickly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this for the sake of time, but I want to introduce to you some of the things that we do in that when we begin to work with people, we want to discern where are you emotionally. So it is possible to be an adult male chronologically and an emotional infant. So what we're going to do real quickly is look at what is an emotional infant, what is an emotional child, what is an emotional adolescent, and what is a healthy mature adult. So let's take a look at these rather quickly here. Emotional infants operate this way. They are the center of the world. They're tyrants. They operate this way. I want what I want, and you're nothing more than an object to give me what I want. They operate this way. You have what I need, and I need it, and you owe me sex, touch, attention, adoration, desire, and delight in me. I simply need you, and nothing else is required of me but for you to give to me. And I am entitled to all your time, attention, energy, love, and services. And I am outraged if you do not give to me or to someone else instead of me. I feel helpless and I never get enough, and my needs are constant. And I will not tolerate you having any ideas, feelings, or interests that do not center and gratifying me. So I'm going to force you to give me because I have to stay in charge, and there is a dependency. Because what? I cannot live without you. There is the need for attachment. But these people are so broken and wounded, they operate from an infant state. Now, the next one, I'm sad to say, is what Luella married. You see, in infancy, a chronological infant is the center of the world, and everything exists for its survival. You see, so in the world of the chronological infant, that actually isn't mom's breast, it's mine. And when an infant's crying and screaming, saying, give me my breast. Normal for a chronological infant, dysfunctional for an emotional infant. Got it? However, a child has to move from that's my breast to that's mom's, and I want it. That's sister's bike, but I want to ride it. And so this is what an emotional child is. This was me. You have things like sex, attention, touch, and approval that I want, and I'm going to find ways to get them from you. So I will lie, trick, charm, whine to get what I want, or manipulate. And I will seek revenge and punish you if you do not give me what I want. And I won't get even with you for the pain that you actually caused me by not doing what I want. And I'll use all the stress responses, lower brain, fight, flight, and freeze to get my way. And when you give interest in other things, it means you don't want me or I'm not good enough, so I'll use negative tension to get your attention. And I'm going to test you as whether I can trust you, your love, and my importance to you, and here's why. Because I need frequent reassurance about my lovability, my adequacy, and my importance to you. I don't know about you, but emotional infants and children can bully you. When Luella didn't meet my needs, I didn't know how to have a healthy relationship, so I would whine and sulk. A lot of people turn to their addiction to go medicate the pain, the loneliness. Now, my father, this is what he was when he died all the years ago. Sadly, he was never able to grow or heal because life cut him short at age 47. My father was an emotional teenager. Here it is. My autonomy. See, teenagers chronologically are trying to figure out independence versus dependence. Mature adults learn interdependence. But if you tell a teenager to do something, their brain hears it as if you're treating them like a what? A child. You go, don't tell me what to do. It couldn't tell my father to do anything. He always did what he wanted. And he'd act out however he wanted to act out. Same thing with an emotional adolescent. My autonomy is threatened by my needing anything from a relationship because it implies to me that I'm still a child, even if I do need it. There's a dependency. for relationship. So I misunderstand your request as an attempt to control me. And I respond with, don't tell me what to do. And I feel rebellious when you criticize, correct, or direct me in any way. And I feel and act as if I already know everything and you can't teach me or tell me anything because I want adult power and privilege without adult responsibility. And I'll compare my fortunes, capabilities, and performance with others because I always have something to prove. And I cannot listen to you with empathy because I perceive your reality as a criticism of me, my beliefs, and my behavior. So I need space to feel autonomy and freedom. Do you know that video games are not marketed to children? The majority of them are marketed to adult men. And it's like you said, adult men will let a game destroy a marriage. I know, I've seen in my office too many times. But you're not talking about an adult. You're talking about a child in front of you. It's a broken soul. They're immature. And when people go into recovery, just because they stopped using, now you start to see this stuff show up in their life. And you wonder, well, you need to stop it. That's where they are emotionally. We have to teach them how to bond, how to heal. And I'm going to argue my healing took place in relationship. All the pain of the soul on my mind comes through relationship. Look where I grew up in. But my healing took place in relationships as well. Relationships can heal us. And I need space to feel autonomy and freedom, and I'm unable to consider consequences from risk-taking and rule-breaking because I believe they have to prove that I am not dependent. So I believe that what we do in our work, particularly in what we do with and live the life and our purpose in teaching relationship skills isn't just to teach a behavioral skill, it's also to teach emotional regulation skills so that they can emotionally regulate themselves and act like a healthy adult even though they're not. I always tell people, when I started learning this work many, many years ago, over 20 now, and learning skills, I was an emotional child acting like an adult. And the more I did that, guess what I became? Well, some people probably argue I'm not there yet. You'd have to ask Luella, she's sitting right over there. But I'm a lot more mature than I used to be. So what is a mature adult? Here we go. I can listen with empathy. Now, there's two traits that adults have that the other three lack, and here they are. Healthy, mature adults, when in conflict, move to compassion, and they move to cooperation. Compassion is the regulator for the brain. I can listen with empathy without demanding, which is the infant, manipulating, which is the child, or rebelling, which is the adolescent. I can give and receive pleasure without fear of unbearable loss, lack of control, or loss of autonomy. I can speak congruently in my own behalf. See, I would never speak up. I would just sulk and hold it in. Immature, childish. You have to learn to speak up and say who you are, all right? And I can speak on behalf of the relationship, even if I know it's going to upset you. You see, faithful are the wounds of a friend. I've had some people in my life speak some truth into me that I did not want. They knew I wouldn't want to hear, but they told me those things about me anyways because they cared about me and they wanted me to be a better person. I can express hurt, fear, and anger about feelings of betrayal without undue withdrawal or attempts to control you. And I can sustain emotional intensity with you. And by the way, I can be with you in your intensity and not take it personal. They have the ability to listen without personalizing. I can ask for what I need, want, or prefer without controlling, engulfing, manipulating, or running from you. And here's why. Think about the domain of meaning. I have a solid autonomy built on core beliefs in personal existence. I have a right to be here. I have a right to exist. That I am lovable. Ask my kids, they'll tell you. I'm adequate, and I'm willing to have my needs met in cooperation with others, not at the expense of others. I have the capacity and the right to seek fulfillment in a variety of ways in addition to what I find with you. And I believe that we can love and be loved, that bonding is a pleasure and a necessity, and it's nurturing to us both. And I have the capacity to join with you in mutual concern and empathy. And I believe that true recovery drives us here. If you're staying sober, but you're staying in the other three, you're not really recovering. You're just sober. We want people to become healthy, mature adults so they can love maturely. I had to learn all this as an adult, and I wanted to be able to learn it so I could raise my kids with it. So we say basically that all humans are needy biologically, and pain pursues pleasure. Whenever we're in pain, you avoid pain by pursuing pleasure, and people turn to addictions to medicate the pain of the lack of bonding. And these are the caress needs I referred to. You can take a picture of them here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. But basically, biologically, every human needs comfort, acceptance, affection, appreciation, approval, attention, respect, encouragement, security, and support. When those needs are met, you feel loved and valued. When they're not met, there's an opposite. If I need attention, I get attention, I feel loved. If I need attention, I don't get attention, I feel rejected. And listen, folks, they don't go away. They're with you to the day you die. The age group that has the highest suicide rate is the elderly. It's not teens, it's the elderly. But think about it. Most are put away in a nursing home. Who comforts them? Where do they get attention? You see what I mean? Suicide is pain and pleasure. Because some people, the pain of no attachment, the pain that I don't matter, is so great, the brain figures out, hey, it'll be more pleasurable to be dead than alive in this rejection. You see, everyone has these needs. They must be met, and they will be met. And if they're not met, then what happens is people turn to negative things. So basically, here's a kind of functional example. Problem behaviors are really about the pain of unmet needs. And what addicts do is they medicate that pain, and over time, it stunts the brain's development. So let's say Luelle is nagging me, and I'm complaining about her nagging, which is usually what we men do. But what I learned a long time ago was that her nagging was really the pain of an unmet need for attention. And when I learned this principle a long time ago, it was just over 20-something years ago, I got a phone call from her. It started out this way: can we talk? It was in that tone. And I thought, no. But I didn't say it because I want to be a better man. I was really trying to change myself. And she starts out, you know, Rick, I get out of bed before you to get things ready for the day and for school. You think you'd make the bed. I promise you right here and before you, I'll make a bed better than her will any day. If you're a vet, you know what I'm talking about, right? We had to make sure there were no wrinkles underneath the mattress. She doesn't do that. But on this particular day, I wasn't listening to her complaining. I was listening for the need. And I said, Luelle, stop a minute. She said, what? I said, stop. I said, if I made the bed, would you feel supported? And she said, yeah. You heard the shift. Yes. No joke. You can ask her. She said right there, 95% of the time when I am home now, I don't like making beds. That's why I like traveling like I do. I don't have to make the bed. But when I am home, 95% of the time, I make the bed for one reason only. When I make the bed, the woman that I love feels supported. Now, I said 95% of the time because, well, hang on. I said 95% of the time because sometimes I get out of bed before her, so she has to make it. And she knows it when I do it, all right? So basically, this is everything I'm talking about, that we are needy. Dr. Lori Gordon calls this the relationship roadmap, so we kind of borrowed this from her, all right? That when you're on the pleasure side of the roadmap, there's the symptoms. You're healthy, you're creative, you're trusting, you're caring, you're open and vulnerable. People are flexible, they feel secure, and they take personal responsibility. When you don't bond, you're on the pain side of the roadmap, and there you're angry, there's fear, you're distrusting, you're guarded, you're controlling, you're disconnected, you isolate, you get sick a lot, and addictions show up on the pain side of the roadmap. Now, what we're doing a lot in our relationship classes is we're teaching people how to communicate, right? And we know that confiding, that's about emotional openness, confiding is the key to bonding. Because you bond wherever you're emotionally open, and wherever you're emotionally open, you're going to draw close physically. It's the way the brain works. So we believe you can teach a behavioral skill, but if people don't have the maturity to sustain the skill, they're not. That's my contention. You're free to disagree. But I have found if you teach a monkey a skill, it's still a monkey till it's not. Because immature people will use your skill as a weapon. And this is what I saw. And when I got different teachers and mentors in my life, I realized I better learn to grow up so that I know how to bond well, and then the skills that I learned became tools to regulate emotion, to make me more mature and create a deeper level of a relationship, what I call us. And I found when us wins, we both win. So I'm going to argue then, in helping addicts, we need skill-based interventions. We all know about, because that's what we're about, right, as educators. We believe in these things. I raise my kids on the skills that we teach and the Adventures in Marriage program. I raise them on those skills. all right? But we need to teach emotional regulation skills, how to help regulate the limbic system. And then we need to teach them communication, problem solving, confiding, compassion, and empathy skills. That's one of the things, my influence is by Steve Stosny. And we need to teach people how to forgive. Because forgiveness is the key to restoring intimacy. And if you know anything about recovery, I think it's step 8, where you have to go make amends. You got to go make amends. Why? Because in making amends, you become a responsible, mature adult. Because mature adults take responsibility for their choices. Make sense? You see, I grew up in a home where I never learned to bond. I never bonded to my biological mother, never bonded to my stepfather, Paul and Barbara Como. I shut them out of my life for many years. And I was a professor at a university many years ago, and my brother and I, Don, my best friend in the world, we were talking, and he shared some things to me about my stepmother. She's still talking bad about me behind my back, and I keep reaching out to her. Folks, I was 30 years old. I'm 56. That was 26 years ago. And I got mad because I looked like a fool. And I sat down, and I started to just dump on word perfect, just dear so-and-so. And I just started letting the anger and the hurt flow. And in the midst of all this conversation takes place in my head. And I was actually answering out loud. So I know it sounds weird. Good thing Luell, it was 11 o'clock at night. Luell was sleeping. She would have had me committed, I guess. But first question that came to my mind is, what do you want from her? And I said, I want her to accept me and approve of me. And I heard back, she can't. And I said, why not? And the little voice in my head said, because apples don't grow on orange trees. And I was puzzled by that. And the little voice in my head said, where did she get it from? And I realized something. My stepmother never got it herself, so she couldn't give it to me. And I could forgive her. You know what I learned? The true, I'll be teaching on forgiveness on Friday, but the litmus test of true forgiveness is empathy with your offender. I never forgave her, so I could never have the apple, because I kept trying to get the orange tree to give me an apple. And I sat there, I quit typing by this time. I sat there, and I said out loud to that little voice, I said, then where do I get a mother? And all I heard was, she gave birth to you. Let me show you how disconnected I was. I said, who is it? No, he said, the voice said to me, I think it was the Spirit of God, said to me, you always had one. And I said, who is it? That's how disconnected I was. And all I heard back was, she gave birth to you. It was 12:02 in the morning. I called my mom. She answered the phone. I'm Ricky to the family. I said, Mom? She said, Ricky? And I said, I can't share this. I'm tearing up. I said, I realized something tonight. She said, what's that? I said, you're my mother. And she said, welcome home. I got a mom when I was 30 years old, and my healing took off. It began to really take off because I began to realize, I put it this way here in this next slide. Addicts are loved. They just don't know they're loved. And their addiction stiff arms intimacy. But my mom loved me purely all those years. I just rejected it because of the craziness I was raised in. And what y'all don't know, and she doesn't know, she's sitting right there. I asked her to come here today. And I'm giving her those flowers to say to her and my dad, she's an example. My mom was an example of loving a son who wasn't very lovable for many years. I always had what I wanted. I just rejected it. But when I found love and allowed myself to heal from love, my addiction settled down quite a bit. Does that make sense? Let's go help others. Is that okay? And Mama, Dad, thank you for being there, even when I didn't know you were. I love you all very much. Thank you all very much.